It has been more than 30 years since O.J. Simpson was acquitted of murdering Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman in a 1995 criminal trial. Simpson, who died last year, was still in debt to the Goldman and Brown families after being found liable for Ron and Nicole's deaths in a civil judgment that happened in 1997. But now those families might actually get paid, with Simpson's estate agreeing to pay Ron Goldman's father almost $58 million. The estate says they'll pay as much as they can by auctioning and selling items and property. So let's bring in former federal prosecutor and president of Los Angeles West Coast Lawyers, Neama Rahmani. Neama, great to see you again. First of all, this is an agreement. How significant is it? What did it take to finally get to this point some 30 years later?
Nicole, this is huge for the Goldman family. And obviously, everyone's always talked about the criminal case, and we're watching it right now. O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. But there was a civil case 2 years later brought on behalf of the Goldman family on wrongful death lawsuit. And we know there's a different standard in a civil case, different jury. That standard is just preponderance of the evidence. And O.J. Simpson was found liable to the tune of more than $33 million. But of course, once you get a civil judgment, you actually have to go collect it. And the Goldmans and their lawyers have been trying to collect this judgment for decades now. Now, the fact that O.J. Simpson died and some of his assets were in a trust and some of them were not, now you have the executor of his estate who's apparently willing to pay off these debts because, again, just like any other creditor, the Goldmans are a claimant and they've made a claim with this estate. So finally, after decades, the Goldmans may get the civil justice that they deserve.
Yeah, so speaking of that, we said at the top that civil win for the Brown and the Goldman families happening in 1997. It's 2025. How was Simpson's estate able to avoid paying the millions of dollars it was ordered to pay for all of these years?
Well, you were watching OJ fleeing law enforcement. Apparently, he was very effective in evading this judgment as well. So typically, when you have a civil judgment, sometimes we call it a paper judgment, you have to actually enforce it. And there's usually one of three ways that you'll enforce a judgment. You can garnish wages. I doubt OJ was a W-2 employee after this murder and the not guilty verdict. He probably wasn't getting much work. You can levy bank accounts. OJ was probably not putting much assets, if any, in his name. And the last thing you can do is attach and sell real property, put a lien on a house and foreclose upon it. But if someone is crafty and they're advised by the right lawyers, what they can take steps not to have assets in their name and make it difficult for creditors to go after them. So I think that's what happened here. Obviously, the judgment doesn't go away, interest accrues, and that's why we got from $33 million to $58 million some decades later. But apparently, at least according to the Goldmans and their lawyers, they've only been paid pennies on the dollar from this judgment. And I think that either means one of two things. Either OJ doesn't have the assets or he was successful in hiding them from the Goldmans.
Yeah, so speaking of that, Simpson's estate executor says the value of O.J. Simpson's estate right now stands at about $500,000 to $1 million, which, yeah, that's a lot of money for the average person. However, we're talking about somebody who accumulated millions of dollars over his life, over his career. The executor also saying that Simpson actually owed money to the IRS when he died last year. So how likely is the Goldman family to be paid what they are owed?
Not very likely, Nicole. And we know that Uncle Sam comes first. Those tax liens, they're at the front of the line in any type of creditor dispute. Then you have what we call our secured creditors. So someone that puts up assets or collateral for a loan. In this case, a judgment would potentially be a secured creditor. And then you have unsecured creditors that are next in line. So to the extent that we're talking about a $58 million claim, the only thing that may matter is that everyone's getting a pro rata share if they get anything at all. If there's the tax liens that are paid, then those secured creditors will be next in line. So to the extent that, someone has a $58 million claim and someone has a $5 million or $6 million claim, for instance, they would get a 10-to-1 ratio. But that doesn't mean that they're going to get the full $58 million. If there's less than $1 million in this estate, we're really talking about pennies on the dollar, Nicole.
Yeah, still pennies on the dollar. Yeah, it has been really tough for both of those families. And that fight continues, as we can see decades later. All right, Neama Rahmani, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Nicole. Talk soon.